Every gardener knows worms are the silent architects of healthy soil. But there's one secret they've been keeping. They don't just roam randomly under the surface. Worms follow invisible pathways called root corridors, and once they find one, they never leave. These hidden tunnels become nutrient highways, moisture banks, and air channels that sustain plants far longer than any fertilizer can. Understanding and nurturing these natural root corridors can completely transform how your garden breathes, drains, and grows. Root corridors are the living veins of the soil. When plants grow, their roots don't just anchor. They carve out microstructures that permanently change the soil's layout. Every fine hair root that pushes through the earth leaves behind a tiny channel. When the plant dies or is harvested, those channels don't vanish. They remain as open spaces filled with decomposing root matter. These old root pathways are what worms seek out. The decomposing roots provide a continuous food source, while the hollow spaces make perfect worm tunnels. Worms prefer these corridors over raw, compacted soil because they're easier to navigate, rich in microbial activity, and perfectly moist. Over time, these corridors become permanent biological pipelines, circulating nutrients and oxygen throughout the bed. Think of them as nature's underground irrigation and composting network, built by plants, maintained by worms, and sustained by gardeners who know how to protect them. Why worms never abandon root corridors once they move in? Worms are creatures of habit. When they find a zone rich in microbial life and moisture, they remain within it, rarely venturing far unless disturbed. Root corridors are their perfect habitat, dark, aerated, and constantly supplied with decaying organic matter. Each corridor acts like a worm hotel with an all-you-can-eat buffet. The secret is in the carbon-nitrogen balance within these tunnels. As roots decay, they release both carbon compounds and nitrogen-rich exudates, attracting bacteria and fungi. Worms feed primarily on these microbes, not the root material itself. So as microbial activity increases, so does worm population density. The more worms stay, the more they deposit castings, enriching the corridor with plant-available nutrients like nitrates, phosphates, and calcium. That's why healthy soils with abundant root corridors are self-fertilizing. They don't need constant external input. Worms do the recycling for you. How to create and maintain permanent root corridors in your garden beds. You don't have to rely on nature alone to build these tunnels. You can actively design and sustain them through smart planting and soil management. Start by avoiding the biggest mistake, deep tilling. Every time you turn the soil over, you destroy the existing corridors, sever fungal networks, and force worms to start over. Instead, use a method known as shallow cultivation. Only disturb the top few inches of soil for aeration or weed control, leaving the deeper layers intact. All right, so next, use a successive root strategy. When one crop finishes, plant another immediately in the same bed, and if possible, choose one with a different root depth. For example, after harvesting carrots or beets, you might follow up with shallow-rooted greens like lettuce or arugula. The old carrot roots will decompose, creating these vertical corridors that new roots and worms will occupy. Over a few seasons, your soil will develop layers of horizontal and vertical worm pathways that really improve drainage, aeration, and root penetration. Another method is root residue composting. Instead of pulling spent plants from the soil, just cut them off at the base and leave the roots in place. This preserves the underground network and feeds worms as the roots break down naturally. Within weeks, the decomposition attracts worms, which then start cycling nutrients right where your next crop will need them most. Now, to keep worms loyal to their root corridors, you really must feed the system continuously. Honestly, the easiest way is by mulching with organic matter. A layer of straw, shredded leaves, or composted manure about 3 to 4 centimeters thick on top of the bed provides slow-release food for both microbes and worms. As it gradually breaks down, the nutrients trickle down into the corridors, enriching them bit by bit. You can also, apply vermicompost tea every few weeks during the growing season. This microbial-rich liquid enhances the food web inside the root corridors, stimulating both worm activity and nutrient cycling. A good feeding ratio to maintain long-term worm presence is 1 part nitrogen-rich material, like green trimmings, food scraps, or fresh manure, to 2 parts carbon-rich material such as leaves, straw, or shredded cardboard. This 1:2 ratio prevents foul odours, balances decomposition, and ensures a steady carbon supply for soil life. If you ever dig near old root zones and find dark, loose, crumbly soil filled with fine worm tunnels, well, you've done it right. That's a living corridor, fertile, moisture-stable, and biologically active. The surprising benefits that root corridors offer go well beyond worm activity. Root corridors don't just feed worms. They also regulate water and air in ways that can't be replicated by mechanical aeration. The tunnels wick moisture through capillary action, distributing it evenly throughout the bed. And during dry spells, these same tunnels retain humidity, reducing plant stress. They also allow beneficial microbes to move freely between zones, spreading disease resistance and nutrient availability across the entire bed. When combined with cover cropping, this system can create soil that maintains structure even in heavy rain. In practical terms, your garden will stay loose and breathable without you ever having to dig again. Moreover, these corridors anchor carbon in the soil. Every decomposed root leaves behind stable organic compounds that lock in carbon for decades, improving soil texture while combating atmospheric carbon loss. In essence, you're not just growing plants, you're building living soil infrastructure that strengthens with time. Applying this method in raised beds, orchards and small gardens is, remarkably effective. Raised beds are perfect for root corridor cultivation because you control every input. Start with a deep mix of compost topsoil and shredded organic matter in a 2:1:1 ratio. Once established, plant root-intensive crops like daikon radish or comfrey to carve vertical tunnels. When these roots decay, worms will colonize those channels and keep them open. In orchards, use deep-rooted cover crops like clover or vetch between trees. Their decaying root systems will create long-term worm corridors, improving nutrient flow around tree roots. Even balcony gardeners can benefit. In container gardens, bury small sections of kitchen scraps vertically and cover them with soil. Over time, these decomposing mini-root corridors will attract compost worms and keep your potting mix alive and fertile. Healthy gardens are built on the corridors worms refuse to leave. When we talk about soil health, we often focus on fertilizers and amendments, but the real magic happens underground, in the spaces we can't see. Those hidden root corridors are the foundation of self-sustaining soil. Once worms move in, they maintain a cycle of fertility that no synthetic input can match. So the next time you finish harvesting a crop, resist the urge to pull everything out. Leave the roots where they are, mulch heavily, and let the worms continue their quiet labour. With time, your garden beds will become more resilient, fertile and balanced, powered by the natural partnership between roots and worms. If you found this guide valuable and you're serious about deep soil ecology and regenerative gardening, make sure to subscribe to Hydrohaven, like this video, and share it with fellow growers. Together we can build gardens that feed themselves, one hidden corridor at a time.